Every client I coach, the question I ask is, how do you want your life to feel? How do you want your life to feel? And like, I don't mean that in some big fictitious, rainbow brush. Like, I mean it like when you wake up in the morning, do you feel better if you have 20 minutes to lay in bed? Or do you feel better if you go ahead and get up? When you are starting your day and you're going into the kitchen, are you a coffee or a tea or a ginger shot, which is my case? I'm a ginger shot in the morning, right? So like, what is it that makes your life feel how you want it to feel?
Hey friends, and welcome to the Next Best Thing podcast. I'm your host, Aundrea, Cline-Thomas. I'm here to help you live the life that you design instead of choosing a life you think you have to settle for. Today, we are talking about how to get what you need. We're going even deeper this time. We had this conversation a little bit with Melody Wilding a few weeks ago, and we're going to go a lot deeper this time to talk about how to speak up and really ask for what you need. Now, if you've been listening over the last few weeks, I talked about how, my therapist really challenged me in this area. And she said it gently and saying, I hope in this new year, and this was around my birthday in June, I hope that you can, really start asking for what you need of everybody around you. And so since then, I've really been thinking about that very deeply of what that should look like and how can I do it strategically. So when I thought about who do I want to talk to about this on the podcast, the first person who came to mind is my friend, Amber Cabral. She's an inclusion strategist, a speaker, and author of 2 books, First Allies and Advocates, and Say More About That. That's really helping people speak up, push back, and have those difficult conversations. Let me tell you, everything doesn't have to be confrontational. That's what I love about Amber, is that she has so much strategy around how she approaches this from a very practical and tactical way. She's also the host of the podcast Guilty Privilege. I love this podcast, which really reframes the discussion and conversation about how all of us have privilege and how we're using it. Now, this conversation today, full of gems, like so many, about how to speak up at work and how to speak up at home. What I love the most about Amber is that she will give you a script. You could literally write down what she says and use it in your own life. Check back. Tell us how it worked, because I know it's going to work, right? And so that's what we're talking about today, is how to get what you want. Why? Because you deserve it. You deserve to live a life, as she'll say. I'm not even going to steal her thunder. I'm going to let Amber say it in the Act Up segment. If you listen to anything, scrub to the Act Up segment at the end. It will just blow your mind. It literally will have you thinking different. This whole conversation will, but if you're short on time, just scrub to the end, because we should have passed around a collection plate after she said what she said in the Act Up segment. So with no further ado, here's Amber. Amber, my love, I'm so happy that you were here. It's been a minute. It has been a minute for those just watching. We just already started the chat. Okay, we just started the chat. But to introduce you to Amber, what I've loved, what I admire the most about you is just really how you move with such intention and such authority in so many spaces. Is that the Detroit in you? Like, what? How did this happen?
I'm going to probably say part of it. I do go back and tell people a lot, like when you grow up in Detroit, like you kind of learn to move, because it is a city. It's a predominantly Black city that is rapidly changing, as it is across many of our, predominantly Black cities across the nation. But my upbringing was around Black folks. And so you got to speak up. You got to say hello when you walk in the room. You got to know how to assert yourself, because we're all family here. And so I do think that, to a degree, what I think people receive about me as like, assertive and straightforward and confident and like willing to like pivot and move has a lot to do with growing up in a city like that, for sure.
No, I think so. I really, really think so. But it's like so many of us, once we even if you go, live in a Black city, but then you go to work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's
Mhm.
sometimes like a rude awakening,
Mhm. Yeah.
especially if you've been in a all black space and then you go to work and then
Yes.
it's like, well, I can't say this because these are all the characteristics. I'm a black woman, or I'm queer, or I'm this or whatever, or I'm just,
Yep.
I'm a white woman or
Yeah.
whatever. Um, and so how do you empower people to say, no, you still have agency even with all of your intersectional identities?
Yeah, absolutely. I always the thing I tell myself that
Mhm.
I end up passing along to people is if I'm not supposed to be here, I wouldn't be. So you have to remember that too. Like there is a reason that you're in the space. And so in the space, take up space. Like you're
Mhm.
there, take up space. Now you don't have to necessarily always take all the space, but there is a reason you're in the space. And so you should lean into whatever um, whether it's an opportunity, whether it is, you noticing something's not quite right, whatever bubbles up where there is a chance for you to assert the value that you can contribute, you should do it. And we have to get really good, in my opinion, at being okay with it being uncomfortable because
Mhm.
I mean, let's be real. Has life been comfortable since 2020? Like, I don't think it has. Like, it's been like this steady stream of constant change. I mean, whether it's understanding all of the like biological impacts of, going through a pandemic, whether it is the implications that that's had for how we work and how we communicate, whether it is the way that that's shaped our global economies, including stock markets, whether it's, the conflicts that we're having in different parts of the world. Like, this is different. And so,
So different.
if no other time exists besides this time, there should be millions of signs right now that tell you do something different. So, if you would ordinarily be quiet, if you would ordinarily, say, oh my gosh, I'm uncomfortable, let me position myself this or that way, what would it look like for you to be different? Because you're in a space at a time where everything is different and unexpected. So, like, do something different and unexpected. That doesn't mean it has to be like, big and loud and disruptive, but it is still worth you asserting your value in that space. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, I think we have to come to expect that most of the spaces that most of us are going to exist in are going to be unexpected, whether it's
Mm.
because they are not inclusive spaces. We are, the only Black person, the only woman, the only person of, my age or generation, the only person who is from the part of the world I'm from, whatever
Mhm.
that particular dynamic might be. We are getting more and more and more diverse. Despite the polarization we're seeing, the diversity is increasing. You are
Mhm.
more likely to encounter difference now than any other point in history. And so, if that's the case, we've got to figure out how to get really good about being like, yo, this isn't what I expected, but I know me and I know the
Mhm.
value I have, and I can still assert and contribute to this space, like with that in mind.
When we're talking about the workplace specifically, you saying that really sparked this in me. Would you say that workplaces are changing more now than
Hmm.
ever before?
Yes, for lots of reasons. So
Mhm.
you have lots more intentionality. Let's be very clear. There's a lot of disruption in this space. I work, in equity, right? So
Mhm.
but there's a lot more intentionality by comparison, right? So even in the spaces where it feels like, we have legislation, we have pushback, we have challenge, the reason that's happened is because we started seeing it, right? It started
Mhm.
working. So the conversation's occurring because people are like, oh, wait, this is a change. I don't know if I want it. So yes, that's the case. There's data that's even showed since the pandemic, especially during the pandemic, more people who were disabled had opportunities to work because we were remote. Remote work is a part of life now. It's the way we are going to engage. So that's different. We have come up with different ways for people who speak different languages to be able to engage in environments where that may not be the primary language of what's being communicated. Zoom has translation services. They've got closed captioning baked into all of these tools. So like we are moving toward a world that is, whether we notice it because the conversations are a little abrasive or not, it's happening. And the
Mhm.
difference is occurring and it's happening in your workplace. Now, you do still have to, probably more now than ever, be able to know how to show up and have the tough conversations, know how to ask the hard questions that get equity for you. particularly if you are unique in your identity in the space that you're in at work. But like the expectations are totally different. The tools are different. The way that people expect to grow as businesses are different. We are much more global in our mindsets, even as very small businesses now, than we used to be even 5 years ago. And so I think change abounds, and be very careful about buying into the narrative that just because it's contentious, that it's not still happening. Because it is. It's still happening. And part of the reason it is so contentious is because when it starts happening, people get mad about it. And that's when they want to get loud. They get frustrated. And so some of this is the product of, oh, it's working. Oh, it's working. We got to figure out how to make it not work anymore. So like, let's shut some of this down. So some of this is that. And so like, it's like that old, what is it? 2 steps forward, 1 step back, it's that thing. It's a push and pull, but progress works that way. And so let's get used to the idea that we get to be a part of that progress. And it's important that I bring my wholeness, my identity, my, ideas, my value into the spaces I'm in. I'm very careful about not telling people like, bring your whole self to work. My whole self don't belong at nobody's job. There are segmented parts that will go. And I make a habit of even telling people, if you choose to follow me on Instagram, you're going to get some parts that you might not see in the workplace, right? So like, we do get to, decide which aspects of our identity that we deploy. But like, I think we can do a much better job of being intentional about deploying so that people start to adjust and, get familiar with the fact that, there are differences here. And for us to win at this, we got to have it. Because guess what? You might not necessarily want these folks working next to you, but you want them to buy your products. You always want that. And so like, as long as we are commodifying our very existence, we got to get used to the differences that exist among us and figure out how to navigate them.
I think that people don't necessarily see this time as opportunity because it's like, oh my gosh, there's so much change. Let me just dig my feet in. Let me just hold on tight. Let me be under the radar.
Yep.
Because I don't want to shake things up because, oh my gosh, if I shake up this too much, then the unknown of what else could be is too much uncertainty for me. But I hear you saying that this is actually an opportunity for you to get what you want.
Everything is moving. I tell people all the time, this is a conversation I've had with my boyfriend, relatively recently, because he can be a bit of a heel digger inner, like where he's like, nope, I want it like this, And I say, as far as the human eye has been able to see, with all of the tools that we have, everything is in motion. Whether it's macro or micro, everything's in motion. Our cells are in motion. Everything that is existing on this planet is literally in motion, whether you can see it with your naked eye or not. Why should you be still? Why would that be the expectation? Why do you think the solution would ever be for me to dig my heels in and stay? So like at some point, even if it's just a small amount, what does movement and change and adjustment and flexibility and growth look like for you? Like that's got to be an everyday question because you will get left behind. And we know people like that. We know people who've been left behind because they were unwilling to move. So like, while it may seem safe to hold on, what is actually the best decision is to figure out, okay, if there's movement here, what do I want it to feel like for me? What would I like to experience in this environment? I don't love the change, but if it's going to happen, where would I like to sit and rest? How can I strategically engineer an opportunity for that? And by the way, if it doesn't work, what are my other alternatives? What might I choose instead? I think if we would be more open to those perspectives and mindsets instead of the idea that we can dig our heels in on anything, we would all be better off and we'd be better equipped to navigate change as a whole, where right now I think most of us are really, really fearful of it.
If it's going to happen already, you might as well lean in, right?
Take the ride.
Take the ride because we're all on it, whether we want it.
We're all on it. We are not the ride operators. We do not get a say on any of that. But if you're gonna be here, you might as well strap on in and decide where you'd like to go. Please, excuse me, can you drop me off at the Kroger up the street? Right. So like, I just am a big believer in that. Like, I will admit, and I do tell people, like, I have a really high tolerance for change, and I like change, even when I'm really frustrated and uncomfortable. Like, I see the value of it so much that I am probably unusual in the sense that I will put myself in the way of like, yep, change is happening, let's go. And that's different. But because I'm that way, it's so easy for me to look at like the folks around me who are like, no, hunker down, and see
Yes.
like, ooh, that's dangerous. Do you see that there's a bus coming? Like,
Right.
like, so I see a lot of that. And so it puts me in a really good position to coach folks like through change, because I am let's run with it. Whereas lots of folks are like,
Yes.
you know,
Right.
but it's happening whether you wanted to or not. And if you just
Yeah.
sit down and think about the world now, or even like, there's an exercise I do with clients. I'll ask, what is something that you were taught in elementary school that's not true today? Like, what's something that were told over and over and over? We get all kinds of things. Oh, I was told Pluto is a planet, whatever. But like, if you just consider how much information you were given when you were younger, that today is like, oh no, that's not true. Like we actually don't do that anymore. Or
Mhm.
that actually wasn't completely accurate because this or that thing has changed. Like,
Yes.
times change. TV used to go off.
You're right.
Now you have on-demand television. We ain't even got to
Right.
watch it at the same time anymore. Like
Right.
like it was inconceivable that would be the case, when I was a
Right.
kid, right? Like, you had to catch Family Matters at the time it came on.
Right.
And that was it, and then we went into like this world of reruns. And then after reruns, it was like, oh, you can download, so like
Right.
none of it's going to be the same.
Yes, no, that's so true. And that's why this podcast was created, because it's like, okay, the world in which I entered work in changed while I
Yeah.
was there. And it's
Yeah.
like, you older millennials, probably the youngest Gen Xers, older millennials, kind of that bridge.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we've been tossed around,
Whew.
like tossed around, and don't even get the credit for how we have just tried to sustain in a
Yes.
world and I had a conversation with my friend who was just very angry about it. And she
Yeah.
was just like, I never got what I was promised. They
Mm.
said if I did this, then I would get that. And it's
Mm.
like, for our generation, the wool was, the rug was pulled up from under us. And so we're having to, navigate that. And so just in terms of speaking up, because I think that's
Mm.
really important. What are the things that people really need to consider kind of before going and saying what they need? How can
Yeah.
they consider it strategically?
Yeah, a few things. First, your friend has a right to be angry.
Yes.
If I were to talk to her, I would validate that, because it is true. We haven't gotten a lot of things that were promised, but we also gotten a lot of things that we didn't know were coming.
Mhm.
So we have some assets in this journey as well. And so, like, not to say that that makes up for like I was told that I would get this. I do think like it does give us a little bit of an opportunity to say, okay, well, let me look and see what's available. And so like I try to take that approach. It still doesn't necessarily get rid of like the dang, I'm mad I didn't get mine, but like I at least feel like I have some recourse. And one of the things that I feel like we have recourse for is how we engage in the workplace. So speaking up is super important. Being an advocate for yourself. I teach people how to be advocates for others as well as for themselves. And I think you
Mhm.
have to start with you. There's a you and an I in the middle of equity for a reason. We have to center us. And the thing that you have to first figure out is like, what do you really want? Like, what is the objective? A lot of times we are at work doing what we think we should do. So you show up and rise to the occasion of what's the deliverable? How, can I get this thing done? What is it that I think my boss wants? What's going to be good for the company? But there are times when we're in the workplace that we should actually be thinking like, yo, what do I need so that I can show up? So I always
Mhm.
tell people to start with that first. Like, what is it that you actually need? Like, whether that's a resource, whether that's a seating arrangement, whether that's flexibility in your work hours, it can be any myriad of it could be a pay raise, whatever. What is it that you actually need? Get really clear on that. When you are clear on it and nervous about it, because usually once you're clear, you're like, oh my gosh, I don't even know if I can have this, right? And what do I
Right.
do from here? I usually kind of encourage people to think about like kind of how like we say in driving, like the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, So
Mhm.
same thing. What is the direction that you should approach? Who is the person? What's the best way for you to get in front of them? Considering what it is that you want to talk about, you want to be thoughtful about the approach, the language, the setting, all of those things need to be considered. So before you even get to the point of having the words come out of your mouth, like how can you set yourself up for success in terms of environment? I had a leader where if we went to lunch together, I was going to get what I wanted. If I rolled up on her in her office and was like, hey, I need da 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 da, I was going to get a wait a minute, come back. I'm trying to, she's tied up mentally. She can't even give it to me, right? She can't even begin. But I'm going to get what I want if I can get you to go to lunch with me. So I would just schedule lunches. I might not even want nothing yet, but I'm like, well, in about a month, I'm going to have a lunch with her just in case, right? And so it's figuring out like what is the best way to get the message across. Once you have all of that set, then you got to actually do it. The best way, if it's something really difficult, is to start with a question. So let's say it's you are like, hey, I feel like I need a pay raise. My scope has evolved. I'm taking on more than I was initially when I agreed to this opportunity, whatever that may be. You want to kind of open with a question around, I'm wondering if you're open to some conversation about how my role has evolved. Leaders are going to say yes. Yeah, I'm absolutely open to that. I want to just have a little bit of discussion about that and see if you can tell me if you think the way that I'm being compensated for the work that I'm doing is equitable. Are you open, to being able to engage in that conversation? Sure. Most leaders are going to tell you yes. Now you have the permission. Yes, you can talk about it. Okay, well, here's my observation. Here's my concern. This is what I think is going on. What are your thoughts? Or can you share with me what you see? Or are you willing to offer some perspective on what I just shared with you that maybe I don't have? Invite them in with a question because now they feel accountable to saying something. Invite them in with a question. And once you get that, they're going to answer. The answer sometimes will be very direct. Ooh, we're not at a place where we can do that at this time. Understood. I understand raises have to be planned and budgeted for. I am curious though, do you agree that I am eligible or that I would be a candidate when we are at the place where we can have raises? Get some of that agreement stuff happening, right? So maybe not right now, but do you see what I'm putting down? Do you, so you kind of want to create this conversation that very much like you and I in this conversation, we're having a dialogue, but you're very strategically going, tell me about this thing. Share your ideas around that thing. You want to take that approach with your leaders, especially if you're asking for something that can be tough. If you're asking for something that's about your safety or your treatment or being respected, sometimes we've got to be a little bit more strategic about that because people can feel real sensitive about feeling confronted. But you can still use the same thing. You can still use a question. Do you think it's the best approach for insert concern here? So when you do that, you put someone on the hook to go, ooh, no, I don't think that's the best approach. Let's talk about what we should be doing instead, right? And so I always tell people, figure out what you want, get really clear about it, be good with being able to talk about it, get the setting right, and then frame it all as a question. There is something in the human DNA that makes us want to answer when people ask us a question. We answer to television. How often are you sitting in a room with Jeopardy and you hear it go off and you're like, oh, it's blah, 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 right? It's just in your bones. Your leaders have that too. So take advantage of that. And that is usually the first level foundational tool you can use to at least get the conversations you want to have that can be difficult, rolling.
See, that's one thing y'all don't know about Amber, because Amber gonna give you a script now.
I am. I'm gonna give you a script.
Amber gonna give you a script, okay?
Every time.
Hey,
Every time.
Sounds so good. Yes.
Every time. I have people literally call me and say, okay, how do I say blah, blah, blah? And I'm talking everything from how do I talk to my ex-husband about these kids?
Right.
To how am I going to tell my boss that their boss is tripping? I get calls like that all the time because I'm like, okay, give me the context. Okay. Tell me what you think you want to say. Okay. Is this a good way to say it? Oh yeah. Can you say that again? So
let me write this
I'm really good at a script. I can give you a script.
We'll have a script. And the thing is that this approach, as you were saying, it doesn't just work at work. It works also just in your interpersonal relationships. So I do want to give you let's do a scenario with family dinners, right? That's always a point of contention for a lot of folks. You're seeing the auntie you haven't seen since the last holiday or whatever, and they just always got something to say. When you having the baby? When are you getting the partner? When are you when? So, or you put on some weight, or all the things. How do you approach when it's the interpersonal relationships, when there is love there?
Right. So I love the love conversations because I could be a little more pushy. So I tend to be a bit more assertive when it is someone that I love. And so I may do a little less of that priming and setting up the scenario, but I still take a very similar approach. So if it is, candidly, my mother used to be, she will never hear this, but she used to be the person that was like, well, you put on a little weight. Really, all the women in my family were like that. Like, oh, you put on a little weight. And I'm like, let me and my 3 chins live. Okay, simmer down.
Mind your
Like, we're okay over here. But what I would typically do is if it's someone that does something consistently that rubs you the wrong way, I would try to get in front of it. And so, and I actually did this with my mother last year. I went to spend some time with her and I had gained some weight. So before I got there, I was on a call with her and I said, listen, I just want to say I'm aware that I'm bigger than I normally am. It's not a conversation I'm interested in engaging in. In order for us to have a fantastic visit together, are you willing to, just kind of leave the weight discussions off the table? Like, if you have some health concerns for me, I'm willing to do that, but I just don't want to get into any weight discussions at this point. Are you willing to do that? I waited for a yes. Yeah, that's fine. Now, what she did do is when I came, as I was there, she goes, now who is this that's like beating you up about your weight? Had no awareness. It's you. It's you that's doing it. You are the person, right? And I was like, I literally had this moment of like, what do you mean? And I said, I think that as bodies evolve and people are around you watching that, sometimes they think that you're not aware of what's happening. And so you can get it from a little bit of everywhere. I left it at that because I didn't want to engage in a debate. I didn't want to engage in you lady, you are the problem, right? Because I didn't want that tension in our relationship. But as you notice I used the same approach. I said, are you willing to, so that I could get, yes, that's fine, I understand, or whatever. And so still tuck that question in there, but you can give the framing in a more assertive way. Like, hey, I don't have bandwidth for this thing. Can we not do that? Yeah. Great. The auntie that shows up drunk all the time. Listen, we have an alcohol-free Thanksgiving. Are you okay with that? You know what? That's cool. I think that's a good idea. Great. Looking forward to seeing you. And when it doesn't happen, you have something to point back to. Well, we had a conversation. Is there a reason why I'm navigating this now? Like, can you give me some context for why this is still happening? People will then feel accountable and bad and often remove themselves. Oh, you know what? You're right. I shouldn't have. I didn't mean to. I don't. Okay, great. Let's move you on down the line. So you still can do the same thing with friends and family, but you know them. So you know how to playful rib at them. You know how to say it in a way where it feels very communal and connective, but still slide the question in there. Are we okay with? Can we agree to? Is there an opportunity for? I've considered this. Are you willing to? I think the more we can find ways to slip it in where we get that confirmation when someone steps out of line, when someone violates that agreement, you now have something to point to. Well, wait a minute. We talked about this and what you said was, and that's not what's happening now. So what's the best solution for us to get to a place where we can continue? Now they're like, oh, you did have me agree.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's just really great because it's, what you're saying is that you could be more assertive with your family. But for me, I'm always thinking with my family, I love them. So my boundaries are a little bit more fluid. Right. Yeah. And then at work, it's you can be, you might be less assertive at work because you're just so afraid. So it's just you're no, I'm flipping it all on its head.
Yeah. Turn it the other way. Yeah. Turn it the other way. And the other thing too is the more fluid you are with your boundaries, the less they are boundaries. Your boundaries have to be boundaries. They have to be clear for you. You have to be committed. And the other thing about your boundaries is they're yours. So people aren't going to adhere to them if you don't. I am a person who does not talk to folks before 10 a.m. Everybody in my life knows this. I am not you don't want to talk to me before 10. Okay. I'm a much better human after 10 o'clock. But before 10, I'm probably awake. You don't want to talk to me. I don't want to talk to you. We should not speak. Everyone in my life knows that because it's a boundary, right? Every once in a while, I'll reach out to someone and without fail, they'll say, oh my gosh, it's before 10 o'clock. Are you okay with a phone call? Because they know, oh, nope, that's a boundary for her. And so we have to get really good at understanding that boundaries, you don't have to be angry. You just have to adhere to it yourself. I have to do the thing that I am sure makes my world better every single time. And people have to know, like, nope, this is something that Aundrea is going to do. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to make sure I make room for that. Let me be respectful of it because she honors it. And then when you step outside of it, because there's always an exception, right?
Right.
You know, when you step outside of it, people will notice and they'll go, oh, I see that are you okay? Is that okay? Are we okay in this space?
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, even with your family, you know, the fluidity of your boundaries can make them feel a lot more like, nah, I mean, we had a conversation. She'll be all right.
Right.
No, she won't. She will
Right.
not. So, like, we also have to get really good at practicing, like, at work, at home, in our communities, with our friends, whomever. The things that really matter to you, the things that give you like that extra jolt of energy, that protect your peace, that like give you, you know, like the safety mechanisms that you need. We have to be really serious about being like, nope, hard line. If I do it, it will be rare. This is the boundary.
Mm-hmm. And it's like
Then other people will adhere.
if I do it, you're welcome. Okay.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you should feel
Yeah.
special.
Exactly. Exactly. It's exactly how people are when they call me. It's early. Like I've literally had people voice note me and say, hey, I know it's before, 10 o'clock, but I wanted to voice note you so you could, and I'm like, oh, I'm glad you know, because I'm not even going to listen to it until I can. And even if I do listen to it, I may not say nothing until I can, So like it is that, like, let it be a treat or a reward. But people are clear, like, this is where we stand. And this is like how I need to operate so that I can show up and be the best for you. And that's the other thing we can tell people about boundaries for us too, is like, this isn't about like rubbing anyone the wrong way. This is about doing what I need to make sure that I show up the best when I'm here. And so then folks feel a lot better about it. Like it's the same way, like, we're intentional about our travel, because if I show up and I'm like cranky and I flew, like had really bumpy travel and like I'm staying in a place that I'm not comfortable, I'm not going to be a great facilitator the next day.
Mm-hmm.
So like, let's set ourselves up for success so that you get the quality of me that you really want.
Right. No, that's so good. Our last segment is called Act Up ACT. Those are my initials. And I was
Yeah.
going to ask, like, how do you find your voice? But I really want to, because all of this is about saying, what do you need? And being very
Mhm.
clear about what you need. And I still think that's a very difficult question for people to ask
Yeah.
themselves,
Yep.
because so much of our framing is, I wrote this in my newsletter recently, so much of our framing is what I think you can handle,
Yep.
or what I think would be acceptable, but
Yep.
not purely what
What I
do
want.
I want? What do I
Mhm.
need? So how would
Mhm.
you tell people today to really start tapping into what they need?
Every client I coach, the question I ask is, how do you want your life to feel? How do you want your life to feel? And like, I don't mean that in some big fictitious, rainbow brush. Like, I mean it like, when you wake up in the morning, do you feel better if you have 20 minutes to lay in bed? Or do you feel better if you go ahead and get up? When you are starting your day and you're going into the kitchen, are you a coffee or a tea or a ginger shot, which is my case? I'm a ginger shot in the morning, right? So like, what is it that makes your life feel how you want it to feel? And what is that feeling? And so recently I'm coaching a gentleman, and he was like, I don't know how to answer that. Like, I mean, I want my life to feel good, but like, I'm not sure I have like good, solid, like examples of what that means. And probably about a week or so later, he was overwhelmed. He's trying to move. He's got a lot going on. He ended up hiring for the first time, hiring some folks to help him clean his house. And so they come and they're cleaning, and he's like, oh, this is going to be great. And he's like, do y'all fold laundry? And they're like, yeah, it's an additional $20. He's like, I'm going to run to the ATM machine. I'll be back. Right. So he goes down, he runs to the ATM machine, he gets the extra cash, he comes up, he pays them, and he ends up sending me a voice note and goes, listen, my house feels so good. I've never done this before. And I'm like, why? Why didn't I do that? Like, everything is in its place. It smells clean. It didn't take any effort or time for me. I was able to like just relax. Like, I just don't even know why I didn't do this. And I literally responded back and said, this is how you want your life to feel. And he was like, oh, that's it. That's it. Exactly. That's it. I feel like my time wasn't tight. I didn't feel rushed. I felt like my space is clean. I can use it how I want to use it. But we're not good at checking ourselves that way. How do you want your life to feel? Every aspect of it. How do you want to feel when you travel? How do you want to feel? Is your bed comfortable? I have literally had people who have said, like, I bought this bed and it's too firm, but I just didn't want to have to buy another one. And I'm like, you're not even sleeping. well.
Mhm.
Is that how you want your life to feel? I don't want my life to feel like that. My life needs
Right.
to feel really great when I'm asleep. So
Right.
like we have to get good at that. So ask yourself that. How do I want my life to feel? And then as you start to define that, start to think about the things you have to do to get there. Sometimes the thing you have to do is have some boundaries. That's how I figured out like before 10 o'clock, not ideal. I used to start my workday. I still technically start my workday at 8. I just don't do anything client facing until 10. And
Right.
I learned because I used to force myself. I was always grumpy on those calls. I never landed those clients. Like,
Mhm.
you don't want me that early. I
Mhm.
don't want me that early. What's the best way for me to use that time instead? And so, like, I just think we have to do a good job of like figuring out how to really honor what it is that is equity for us. That's how I kind of got to humaning well. What does equity look like for me so that I
Mhm.
can pour into the next person, so that I can help people show up the way that, you know, they need to on my team, so that I can be a good resource to my family members and my friends. Like, what do I actually need? So many of us are doing exactly what you just said. We're doing what's necessary. We're doing what we think we can get away with. We're doing what we think people expect of us, but we're not doing what we actually need. And very
Mhm.
often, you doing what you actually need makes it so much easier to do the rest of that stuff. Way
Mhm.
easier. Because I'm full. My cup is full. My energy's full. I'm rested. I ate what I needed. I slept
Mhm.
good last night. I could show up and do whatever. Oh, we got to change directions? Cool. No problem. Oh, we walked the block out of the way? No big deal. Extra exercise. I don't care. Let me have no rest. Let me not have had my ginger shot that day. Right? I'm going to be like, oh my gosh, we walked the extra block. It's 80 degrees outside. Like, you know, it's a whole
Right.
different energy. And we've
Right.
seen this. We've seen it. We've been in, you know, Target and watched the person like flip out on the customer service person. You're like, whoa, who pissed in your cereal this morning? You know, so like we have to figure out how we want our lives to feel. And then we have to be willing to take the steps necessary to create that for us. And for everybody, depending on what phase of life you're in, that's going to look different. It doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be paying to get your house clean. It could be the time of day you start. It could be the time you go to bed. It can be all kinds of things, but start by at least trying to figure that out.
Oh, Amber, that is that. Mm, that
It's
whole thing.
necessary.
It's beyond. And I try not to start before 11 because of that
Yeah.
same thing where I just like my brain is on fire and I need to get this thing out and I can't have distractions. And so I
Yep.
just don't like to have meetings before 11.
Yep, yep. And I've
Ooh,
told people too, to that end, like people think that that means that I'm not working. And I'm like, no, no, no. I'm a much better person if I can do what I need to do at the
mhm.
top of the day. I'm still working. I'm just not working for you.
Right,
I'm
right,
working
right,
for me. So
right.
like, yeah, it's critically important. And so we have to get away from this idea that like us not working the same as other people makes us lazy or less than. No, I'm doing what works for me to show up the best for you.
Hmm. Mm. Well, I know you got a coaching program. So
I
how
do.
can people join the wait list or
I
whatever?
do. So yes, I just announced it, and so I'm so nervous about it. As you probably can tell,
Please don't be. Well, I mean,
I'm
girl,
so nervous. You know, it's a new thing. It's a new
it's a
thing. You
new
know,
thing, but it's your lane.
yeah. I'm
It's your bag.
excited.
Like
I'm
it's your
excited.
thing.
I listen. I'm taking a new approach, so I'm gonna. This is a little teaser because I haven't shared this with anyone, and it's
Mhm.
not necessarily gonna be a thing you're gonna necessarily be able to see right away. But I'm taking a different approach to coaching. I do this with my coaching clients now, but it's asynchronous.
Mm.
So you can hit me up 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I'm gonna respond to you one day. I'm available once a day, 5 days a week. So you get a constant conversation, kind of like the way
Oh
you
wow.
engage with your friends. And I'm doing that because I realize that even for myself, what happens when I am engaging with my own coaches, sometimes something happens and I'm like, I gotta wait till next week to talk
Yes.
about this. Or, you may shoot an email over and they may or may not get to it. And I wanna be as available as possible, but I also wanna not be in those situations where it's like, I've got a call with you this week, but like, I don't really need you. I didn't have anything come up. I don't have any questions. I haven't had a chance to work on the thing you gave me last month. So I want to try to create this dynamic where people are getting what they need and they're getting a bunch of that instead of just like, we've got a call, we've got to meet. And so
Mhm.
it's going to look different in that way. There is a wait list. So if you want to know, if you want to be eligible to apply, because there is an application process, you can go to ambercabral.com/coaching. and sign up there, drop your email. We will start sending communications about, what to do if you're interested, how to apply. All of that stuff is going to start really soon. But yeah, I'm going to start making it public facing. I've been coaching for a while. Like, it's been 4 years. I've coached executives, I've coached friends, I've coached folks I've just come in contact with that are colleagues, and people have been asking me to do this. And I've just been like, nobody really wants me to coach now. I can be really direct, but like, it's here now, so we'll see. But yes, I just launched it. I'm really excited. I think it's different. I think it makes it really accessible. And I think if you're a person who wants to move and do, this is going to work better for you than having like that once a month kind of cadence happening.
Lean in. And how else can we support you? Guilty Privilege, which is beautifully done. You do a really good job. I really enjoy the conversations.
Thank you.
That you have there. It's really
Thank you. I appreciate that, because I'm really on the fence about if Guilty Privilege will continue past this year, but we will see. So I do have a podcast called Guilty Privilege. It is conversations with folks about the privilege that they have, because if we can figure out our privilege, we can show up as better allies and advocates and supporters of others and for ourselves. And so the conversations are kind of like that. And they're with, people from all walks of life. Like, it's all kinds of people, people that work in DEI, people that are in leadership, people who know HR, people. This season, I have a woman who works in the cannabis industry. So like, we try to keep the people interesting. And then there's a lot of solo episodes with me too this season about just like what we should be thinking about when we're speaking up, when we're challenging, when we want to show up as an advocate, when we're trying to lean into our own privilege and not in a way that's like, greedy, but like helpful. And so that you can always go and find Guilty Privilege. Episodes are on YouTube, or what is it, Spotify or Apple Music or whatever they're calling themselves these days. You can find it anywhere pods are casted. And then if you're just generally interested in me, you can go to ambercabral.com, or if you choose to follow me on Instagram, you get all of me. And if you want professional me, you should go to LinkedIn.
It's all a good time. Everywhere is a good time.
Yes,
Amber, thank you so much. We're going to put all the details in the description so people can contact you. Thank you so much, friend, for being here. This is wonderful.
Thanks for having me. This was good.
Yeah, this is so fun.
Thanks for listening to The Next Best Thing with Aundrea Cline-Thomas, a Mountain Court Media production. The music was written, recorded, and produced by Gavin Casey, also known as Dark Purple. Now, if you like what you heard, please subscribe, give us a 5-star rating, and write a comment on your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to share it with friends. And I hope this episode helps you on your journey. See you next time.